this?
Well, look, on one hand, we have to deal with guns and primarily ghost guns. There are a lot of things that Democrats and Republicans agree on, and we saw some legislation earlier this year. We need to see more of that. The other thing that has to happen, though, when we look at crime, is we have to recognize what the pandemic has done. Crime was at a 40-year low before COVID. The pandemic and the continuation of it has been a catalyst for property and violent crime. People are hurting, not just economically, but mentally and emotionally. There's a sociological concept called anomie. That's where people oftentimes lack social and ethical standards compared to the mainstream. In order to change this, particularly when it comes to teenagers, we have to give people access to the same resources that others have. That primarily focuses on work and education infrastructure, because they have to see their life as being bigger than simply stealing someone's Dodge Charger or hurting someone at school. They have to recognize that their life matters more. So look, we know that politicians are dealing with a lot, but we also know that in DC, there are a lot of cameras. Use those cameras, identify the people who are engaging in these acts, charge them, convict them, put them through some sort of juvenile program, some sort of program where they can actually get the skill sets they need. But we need to address this issue. Look, we know that we want to see diversion programs because we recognize that what teenagers are doing is part of a larger problem, but that does not absolve them from engaging in an activity that is criminal. And so we need to strike a balance. We can't just let them out on the street and act like it didn't happen. But of course, judges and even politicians are also dealing with the narrative around cash bail and how we address that particular issue. So there's a lot going on in the grand scheme. Again, we know that crime was low, it's increased. When a person does a crime, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are hit with the maximum penalty. It could mean a diversion program, but it should mean some sort of repercussion for their actions. I think oftentimes when we start talking about access to things, it's assumed that all these kids have access in the same way. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of programs, particularly programs that people can pay for, even a lot of free programs. But I think it gets back to what I was saying sociologically about anomie, that people are hurting mentally, emotionally, as well as economically. And the mental and emotional aspect is something that we haven't addressed well with, particularly when it comes to youth, to teenagers, and the way that oftentimes, particularly boys, are socialized to act out violently instead of necessarily addressing their trauma and pain.
A role in how these kids are acting out?
I mean, I'm unsure. Look, I mean, we've always had rap lyrics and rock and roll lyrics that have glamorized violence. I think part of what happens is that record labels are also to blame for this, because oftentimes you have rappers and artists take multiple different types of songs, but only those are the particular songs that go on the album. Those are the ones that they tend to put money behind. But I mean, look, I think that rap music is oftentimes a reflection of the way people are living. It doesn't necessarily become the catalyst. So, I think that it gets a bad rap, but it's definitely a reflection of something. And oftentimes what it is, it's a system that perpetuates that violence. And it's young people in oftentimes inner cities that feel as though they have nothing to live for.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for thinking deep thoughts.
Right.
You like
Recording stopped.
What was that? The old Saturday Night Live